for the freedom and glory of Greece!
Welcome to Not Another Greek History Podcast, the podcast that aims to be exactly what it says. I'm your host, Onoufios Dovletis, and together we'll discover the not so frequently told stories of Greece's history that will change the way you view things forever. Welcome back, everyone. In the previous episode, we started talking about the life of Alexander the Great, Macedonia, the place where he was from, and the naming dispute between Greece and the so-called North Macedonia. And in this episode, we'll continue and we'll conclude about that. They even went as far as to say that the Greeks occupied the region of Macedonia and that they have to get it back. It's what I told you earlier. Now it's getting serious. It's getting more serious. It's not just about the name. Historically speaking, though, it's a known fact that these are Slavic people, and Slavic people only appeared in this area in the 6th century AD. That means 1,000 years after Alexander the Great, which means they shouldn't have no claim to any land because they were never here. Ethnically, the population of the country is 58% Slavic, 24% Albanian, almost 4% Turkish, and 14 other ethnicities. Their main language, apart from Albanian, is the so-called Macedonian. In 1944, they made a decision to codify a Macedonian language, which is actually a dialect of Bulgarian, and it had always been identified as Bulgarian, but Tito, using linguists, added Serbian elements to differentiate it from Bulgarian. So Yugoslavia tried to have this language recognized internationally. The United Nations Conference of 1977, which was held in Athens, where the so-called Macedonian language was mentioned, and it was practically recognized in Athens. It's happening in Athens. And we have the United Nations officially recognizing the so-called Macedonian language in 1993, along with the country itself. As I was watching a wonderful BBC documentary in the footsteps of Alexander the Great with Michael Wood, at some point he said, Alexander said something to his generals in Macedonian. And I'm like, what on earth is this Macedonian language, this ancient Macedonian language? Because he's not talking about a modern Macedonian language, which is made up. It's not real, it's not true, but it's the Macedonian language. But okay, but he's talking about antiquity. And we've mentioned that all the names used by the Macedonians were Greek. Philip, Alexander, Olympias, Cleopatra, and so on. The very founders of Alexander's dynasty were from southern Greece, from Argos, which along with Athens are the oldest continuously inhabited cities of Europe. That's why the dynasty of Alexander was called Argeade, Argeades, and their dialect was the Doric, as we said. So seriously, what is the phrase that he said something in Macedonian supposed to mean in a documentary? In the 1980s, a Greek government even said that we would accept the term Slavo-Macedonian for these people, and that immigrants from these two countries should be differentiated abroad as Greek Macedonians and Yugoslav Macedonians. A proposed name for that country in the beginning was Slavo-Macedonia, or the even weirder New Macedonia, but Greece of course rejected any name including the Greek name Macedonia. In antiquity, that area above Greece was called Paeonia. Even so, they still have nothing to do with that name either. But they didn't choose that name because it has no significance now. Like, who has even heard of the name Paeonia? There have been arguments also at some point that even that part was called Macedonia. So it makes sense for them to use it. I'm listening to you, I can hear you, the ones that actually know a couple of things about this, and you were thinking, but at some point Macedonia even included that part. And I got you, it's coming up. It's true that during the Roman occupation from the 2nd century BC, a province devised, not divided, devised by the Romans, created by the Romans, included parts of Greece, Albania, Bulgaria, as well as that country, and the whole thing was called Macedonia. Ta-da! But also during Alexander's time, the whole world from Greece up to India, and that's a huge part of the planet, it was part of the Macedonian Empire. Should also Egypt, Turkey, Iran, Pakistan, or India be called Macedonia? Or in another example, the Roman Empire included Albania, Armenia,
France, Germany, Greece, Iraq, Israel, Lebanon, Morocco, Slovenia, Spain, Turkey, and the UK.
to name a few. Does it make sense for any of those countries to just call themselves Roman nowadays? And to even go as far as to claim the Roman history or to say that Italy has taken Rome from them? Believe it or not, Greece had no support on this from anyone. Already in the 1920s, so this is how far back this goes, a century ago, a communist convention in Berlin mentions for the first time the so-called Macedonian Slavs. They say that all the nations that lived in the province of Macedonia, so we have a province, another province of Macedonia within the Ottoman Empire back then, they're just Macedonians. They're not Greeks, they're not Turkish, they're not Bulgarian, they're not anything else. They're Macedonians. And of course, they're being suppressed by Greece, Serbia, Bulgaria, Turkey, and so on. Therefore, the communists were the ones pushing for an independent Macedonia. The point was to take Macedonia away in whatever way from the Greeks, the Turks, or the Bulgarians, and for Russia to eventually control the region of Macedonia, or whatever area they thought Macedonia was, because of its location in Eastern Europe. So it's about location. Bulgaria also wanted to have the region of the actual Macedonia, so we're talking about Greece, because that would give them access to the Mediterranean Sea. So of course, again, it's about location, trade, ports, and stuff like that. In the 1880s, the Bulgarians are writing, without Macedonia, the Bulgarian state and nation in the Balkans is meaningless. When they say Macedonia, though, of course, they refer to the country below them, that's Greece, and not to the country next to them, because of course, no one back then even dreams of referring to that part of Europe as Macedonia. Macedonia is below Bulgaria. That's why in World War II, Bulgaria sided with Italy and Germany, hoping that those powers would help the Bulgarian agenda for a great Bulgaria. That didn't really interest the Nazis, though. Instead, the Germans allowed Bulgaria only to control Macedonia. In the first half of the 20th century, this is mind-blowing, Greece fought over Macedonia 6 times. 4 out of those were against Bulgaria. Now, in the 1990s, the European community recognized them as Macedonia, ignoring Greece completely. In 1992, there was a massive demonstration with 1 million people in Thessaloniki, where I'm from, and that is 1/10 of the country's population. It's like having a demonstration in, let's say, Boston in the United States with 35 million people. That does not just happen. Keep in mind that the total population of Thessaloniki is 1 million. I still remember that we also took part in the demonstration because back then I lived in Thessaloniki and I was 7 years old. Another demonstration, of course, was held in Athens, also with 1 million people. At the same time, newspapers abroad were slandering Greece as if we were the crazy ones. Let me tell you that out of this whole research that I've done, which lasted some months, after watching documentaries, reading books, watching movies, and so on, the most mind-blowing thing that I've ever read is what's coming up. The Economist specifically called Greece the patient of Europe and called for Greece's expulsion from the European community because they said, among others, that Greece didn't want Turkey to be part of the EU. By the way, if it's that great, why hasn't it happened yet? That was in 1991 or 92. Now it's 2025. French newspapers wrote, Greece, to put it mildly, does not enjoy much appreciation within the European community. The issue of Macedonia has only added to a long history of criticism that dates back to the very first days of Greece's accession. Thank you, friends. The British Financial Times called Greece the Achilles heel. They were making a reference to ancient Greece. That was so sophisticated, England. By the way, let me tell you that of all the countries in the world, the United States are my number one listeners with, I think, about 27%. The UK is second with 25%. Over 50% of my listeners are from these countries. I think I have maybe about 5% from France. The Guardian has a good one. Greece appears to be adopting an increasingly narrow, ethnically focused stance, creating obstacles not only for Macedonia, but also for improving relations with Turkey. After the meeting, the foreign minister of a northern European country, it's not named, but I have an idea to be honest, remarked, "It is a shame that the Greeks act like a small-minded, nationalist Balkan state rather than a modern member of the European community." This supposed Macedonia is a Balkan state, but as you can see, they're diminishing the Balkan states. A good one came from Denmark, and I think it was a minister from Denmark. But Denmark, by the way, for some reason, supported that country more than anyone else in Europe. So they said, Greece has become a burden on European cooperation. It is completely unacceptable for the European countries to dictate to other countries their name. In Greece, insanity has become a national disease. It is difficult to see how the unarmed and underdeveloped Macedonia, with its 2 million inhabitants, can pose a threat to NATO and Greece. In Italy, La Repubblica wrote, Greece, the black sheep that bleeds the European community. One of the best ones, though, if not the best, of course, didn't come from Europe. It came from the United States. United States, thank you, you rock our world. And it came from Time magazine. So let's see. If Kosovo erupts, Macedonia could follow, given its large Albanian population. Kosovo is an Albanian place, full of Albanians anyway. This might trigger intervention from Greece. Look at that. This might trigger intervention from Greece, which harbors a contentious claim over the land of Alexander the Great. Greece's involvement, in turn, could draw in its longtime rival, Turkey. This is journalism at its finest. Like, this person is completely clueless as to what Greece is, where Greece is, what the geography is, that Greece actually is the place where Alexander the Great was born, that this is the land of Alexander the Great. It's not just the name, it's also the place where he was born. It doesn't mean that when you have any place called Macedonia that he was born there. It's mind-blowing. I think that all this hostility stems from the Western European notion that not only are they superior, but also that Greece is inferior. And although both are true, it is also truly sad for someone so much better to act in such a lowly way. It had been suggested at some point that internationally they would be recognized with a name that wouldn't include Macedonia, but they could call their country whatever they wanted. In the same way that you call Greece, Greece, but we call it Ελλάδα, or we call Germany, Germany, but they call their country Deutschland, and so on. There's many examples. That was even suggested by the United States to Skopje, but they rejected it. And boy, were they right, because in the end, they won. The United States and Europe didn't really take Greece's side, although the truth is obviously on the Greek side. The USA recognized that country as Macedonia in 2004. NBC wrote 20 years ago. The United States has recognized the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia as Macedonia, the name strongly rejected by neighbor Greece for the past 13 years. It was the first major policy move announced by Washington following re-election of President Bush on Wednesday. There was jubilation in Macedonia, an ally of the Americans in the Iraq military coalition, but outrage in Greece, a NATO ally, where the news came out of the blue. The European Union also did not appear to have been informed. But anyway, the State Department website simply calls them Macedonia, although it does say Macedonia's name changed to the Republic of North Macedonia, but they just called it Macedonia. Here's a fun fact for you. A study about Harvard University found that out of 800 books that mention Macedonia, over 720 out of 800 are based on sources from that country and not from Greece. Eventually in 2018, with the Prespa agreement, Greece and that other country were forced to reach a supposed compromise to end the dispute. It was determined that the other country would indeed be called Macedonia, but they would add the word North to clarify that they no longer claim historical ties to ancient Macedonia, and also their airport, which they had named Alexander the Great, as we said, was simply renamed after their capital, Skopje. In 2018 and 19, more demonstrations were held in many places in Greece, with over 1 million people in Athens alone. The government, which was just following orders from abroad, obviously, tried to downplay the demonstration and estimated the protesters to be from 1,060,000. Like, what a sellout. I think Alexander the Great would be very ashamed of what Greece has come to be now, and of the fact that some people didn't even exist at his time, and they're claiming not just him, but also his homeland's name and history. For argument's sake, let's say that we accept that they have whatever right to also use the name Macedonia. No, they are saying that they are the only ones that should be using it. They don't even accept that Greece has the right to use the name Macedonia. For them, the name North Macedonia is an unfair compromise. They only want their country to be called simply Macedonia. That's complete madness. Despite the agreement, which was supposed to be to solve this whole misunderstanding, the whole world has been confused. People think that Alexander was from another country, not from Greece, or that Macedonia was split in south and north, or that maybe even we, the Greeks, stole the name Macedonia from them. The name Macedonia, by the way, is used within Greece for a lot of things. For example, in Thessaloniki, we have the Macedonia University, so you can imagine how confusing that is. The fact is that this Greek name makes sense to be used only by Greece. So the issue remains very problematic. If you ever meet a foreigner, by the way, and you ask them where they're from and they reply, I'm Macedonian, they're not. They mean that they're Slavic people. No actual Macedonia, like me, for example, would ever say that we're Macedonian. We would just say we're Greek, and then I might add that I'm Macedonian just to show you what part of Greece I'm from. What is certain is that there cannot be two completely different peoples called Macedonians. It doesn't make sense because we have, as I said, Korea and all that. So we have North and South Korea, but they're all Koreans. In this case, we're not Macedonians in general. We are Macedonian, but we're Greek, and they are Slavic people. And also, you can't have two countries, for example, calling their people the same thing, calling them French, calling them American, Australian, and so on. There cannot be a North and the plain Macedonian because it's not like North and South Korea that I mentioned earlier. But in this case, only one country can use the name Macedonia, and it's the one that doesn't need a North, South, right, left, or whatever Macedonia. Keep in mind that this is not a matter of opinion, and I encourage you, if you're interested, to do your own research. In Greece, we're very lucky to have a history that has been studied by hundreds of historians from all over the world. So what we are taught in school and university is not based on what we have written and what the government dictates. The government, by the way, in Greece, it doesn't just make up history like this and doesn't serve specific agendas. If anything, what we complain about in Greece is that our governments don't seem to have any such agendas, as opposed to most of our lovely neighbors like Turkey, Albania, that country, and so on. Personally, now and then I think about this and I'm like, is this really happening? I really cannot believe that a country has actually done this and has succeeded. And then it gets worse because you realize once more that you cannot trust Europe and the United States. You cannot trust anyone, okay, but specifically the Western Europeans and the United States. The Greeks were completely backstabbed. The Western world didn't just betray a trusted ally like Greece that always fought on their side, like in both world wars. They also betrayed the very people on whose culture they based their entire Western civilization, the Greeks. And speaking of Western civilization, to get back to Alexander the Great, he is the one that truly represents what Greece is really about. And Greece is really a mix of the West and the East, and not just one of the two, as the Western Europeans like to think. And we're not done. This is to be continued in the next episode, so stay tuned. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share. Until next time, this is Onoufiros Dovletis signing off from Not Another Greek History Podcast.